So I'm just going to start with a very short introduction to CILogon, and then Scott will take over and give all the really interesting details. CILogon is a project out of the National Center for Supercomputing Applications at the University of Illinois, where Scott and I both work. And it's a project focused on enabling federated identity and access management for collaborations. Scott mentioned we work a lot with scientific collaborations, but exciting today to also talk about humanities collaborations. So I think we can serve collaborations of different type. And so through our 10 years of effort on the CILogon project, or actually more than 10 years at this point, we want to enable secure logon to the applications and online infrastructure that enables collaborative research. And we want to do that using identity and access management that's seamless for the members of the collaboration. Being seamless means they use federated identities, they use their existing identities, so the collaboration members log in with their existing credentials from their home organization. They don't have to go through a process of setting new passwords. And that they go through a single onboarding process that assigns attributes and groups and roles that are then managed consistently across the multiple applications in that collaboration. And so it's seamless because with one onboarding process, you get access to all the different components in the collaboration and you get to work right away. And so in this time, we've built up a service that is now supporting over 12,000 active users each month from over 400 organizations around the world, including in Australia. And so the platform is built to support the interfaces, the different scientific applications or humanities applications or research applications need to do the identity and access management. So that includes high performance computing, Jupyter notebooks, Globus data transfers, applications that need to authorize access to REST APIs, et cetera. And so that may involve X509 certificates, OpenID Connect ID tokens, SAML assertions, other authorization tokens like PSI tokens, could involve LDAP queries. And so those interfaces are all plugged into a backend through co-manage and grouper that provides consistent groups and authorization information through a user registry, so that when the collaboration member logs in with their federated identity, they get those consistent attributes for access to the applications. And so to accomplish this vision of seamless identity and access management for research collaborations, we're building on community tools, trusted tools, including Shibboleth, Co-Manage, and Grouper, and providing hosted identity and access management services. We get economies of scale by providing an IAM platform used by many collaborations. We take care of installing this software and keeping it running so that the collaborations can focus on their work, focus on their managing their attributes, their authorizations, but not focusing on the underlying maintenance of the underlying platform. And we've been growing CILogon operations since we began production operations in 2010. And throughout our operations, we've been focused on reliability and sustainability because, of course, that's what you need in an IAM platform. You need to be able to log in to do your work. So it's critical for the IAM platform to be sustained for the long term and to be reliable. And so some more details about those components that we build on. They're all open source. We've got some internal open source software, including our own OpenID Connect implementation. I already mentioned Shibboleth, Co-Manage, and Grouper. We also use components from Identity Python, PIF, and Setosa specifically. And PSI tokens is other open source software for federated authorization tokens. And OpenLDAP is another important software component for us for enabling those applications that need attributes out of LDAP. So in terms of sustainability, CILogon was initially developed under funding from the US National Science Foundation and the Department of Energy. And we've transitioned from that initial grant funding to a nonprofit subscription model that's administered by the University of Illinois. And that includes a subscription that the AAF currently has with CILogon. And so that provides support for our long-term financial sustainability. It provides contracted service level agreements for the subscribers, and it enables us to remain open source and focused on the needs of research and scholarship collaborations. We also do get some very valuable operational support from the Exceed infrastructure in the United States. So I want to be sure to acknowledge that. So for more details about our subscription model, you can see this page, cilogon.org/subscribe. So I mentioned we've been doing this for over 10 years. And we started off with X509, added our OAuth support fairly early on. We went international in 2016 with the connection to EduGain through our in-common federation in the United States. We added the co-managed support for managing those attributes and groups in 2017. And we transitioned to our subscription funding model in 2019 after the end of our last grant. And lately this year, we joined the In-Common Catalyst program that's providing some good community connections to us. And we've added support for more token types, more JSON Web Token types. So we continue to see growth in our use of the service. And so here's just a trend line over the last few years of the active users per month. So we're up over 12,000 active users per month. I think that's my last slide. So let me pause there, hand it over to Scott and see any questions or comments at this point. Well, I'll be watching the chat, and otherwise, why don't you take it away, Scott?
You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Let me try sharing again. Once I share, it seems to not want to let me unmute. All right. So can you see my web browser?
Yes, it's all good.
It's all good. Okay. So as Jim mentioned, we've been focusing for a while on really making seamless access to resources go. And one of the ways we knew that we had to facilitate that was by providing for collaboration management. And we also wanted to base our work on federated identity. We want users to be able to bring the identities that they already have to be able to collaborate. You have collaborators, probably, various institutions and organizations. And nowadays, research is very international. So you might have people from all different continents working on your project. And it's really convenient if they can bring their existing electronic identities and credentials to your project and access resources with the credentials they already have and they already know how to manage. Doing that requires, though, some new tooling. In the old days, the tools assume that you were going to create a new login and a new password, a new identity for each user. And so we realized a number of years ago that we needed a different tool, one that was really built on federated identity from the ground up, and that we needed a tool to manage federated identities. And so that's where this tool came from, co-manage. And the full name of the tool is co-manage registry, because that's what it is. It's a person registry, and it's designed to manage people that bring federated identities, bring them together and allow them to collaborate. Let me log in very quickly, and I'm going to log in initially on this browser with my NCSA identity. just to show you a quick screen to let you know that CoManage is a multi-tenant application. And each tenant is called a collaborative organization, or a CO. So that's the CO in CoManage. And this allows a single deployment to have multiple collaborative organizations that can leverage the platform and do what they need to do and provide access to resources. And so today I'm going to be working inside of an imaginary collaborative organization that we use for demo purposes, one called the Medium Energy Synchrotron Source. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch browsers quickly, and I'm going to log in now to the registry, but I'm going to log in as one of the administrators for one of the COs. And so I'm going to log in using my University of Wisconsin identity, and I already had single signed in earlier before the demo, so I just got in. And this is the view that you would see if you were an administrator for one of the collaborative organizations. And so you see initially a dashboard that has a couple of different services that might be available for users, and maybe some announcements. I'll come back and I'll talk about these a little bit later. What I want to focus on, first of all, is how we onboard people onto the platform. Because in order to put people into groups and authorize their access to data and control that access, we need to be able to, first of all, have the users on the platform. So CoManage supports multiple ways of onboarding people into the platform. We can do self-sign-up enrollment flows, so that you would put a link somewhere, maybe on a wiki, or you'd put it on the project page, somewhere, and say, hey, if you want to join our project, click here and fill out the form and request to join the collaboration. So that would be a self-service flow that users find either through a link or sometimes through email. And you can have as many different enrollment flows as your collaboration needs, because you might need to onboard, let's say, faculty from a different way than you would onboard graduate students. Or maybe you even want to support citizen scientists, but you want to have a slightly different enrollment flow for them. Collect different sorts of information. And CoManage allows all that because you can have as many different enrollment flows, and you can customize each one for the needs. Another type of enrollment flow that CoManage supports is invitation enrollment flows. And that's what I thought I would sort of demo first to give you a flavor for how this works. So we can imagine I've logged in here and I'm one of the administrators of the platform. And I might lead, for example, one of the organizational units of this collaboration. I might lead the optics team. And because of that, if I click up here on my name, I'll see some links. And one of the links I'll see is invite a collaborator, or more specifically, I can invite an optics team collaborator. Since I'm the leader of the optics team, I have permissions to do that. So I could click on that link, and I would get a little set of instructions that would tell me what I have to do. So I can go ahead and I can start an enrollment flow. And you've all seen enrollment flows. So let me go through this quickly. So I'm just going to invite a collaborator from the University of Illinois. And I'll click submit. And so what will happen is we've configured this enrollment flow to send out an email to the user, because we usually want to verify emails. You don't have to, but most people choose to do that. And let's see if I can get this over here. Here we go. I think this is the one. So what happens is I just got an email, and is that the right one? Just double check. Yeah, that should be the right one. I just got an email, and the text of this email is all customizable, so you can configure that per enrollment flow so that it makes sense for you users, for whichever group of users you're trying to onboard. And so I can go ahead, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this link, and then I am going to open up a private browsing window because I want to pretend now that I am this new collaborator from the University of Illinois that I've just invited. And we want to see that experience. So I'm presented then with the CILogon page where I have to select my identity provider or my login server. I have to choose which identity I'm going to use to authenticate. And as Jim mentioned, we have integrations through our federation, our identity federation in the United States called InCommon. We're part of the broader global collaboration called EduGain. And so is the Australian Access Federation, as I'm sure Patrick and John have been explaining to you people, if you didn't know, and Siobhan also. And so we have thousands and thousands of different identity providers that users would be able to use to get to your platform or to get to your collaboration. So I'm going to start typing, and I'm going to find the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Go ahead and log in. You've all seen logins before. The U of I does require me to use a second factor to authenticate, and in the US, a lot of people like Duo, so I have to use my cell phone here. Hit my prompt. There we go. And so I'll get logged in, and CoManage will record that information about me, how I authenticated, which identity I brought to the platform, and then go through the process of adding me to the collaboration. And then when I've done, I've configured CoManage to redirect to this template landing page. It's completely customizable. And so we often see that organizations will have their user communities when the enrollment's done, land on different pages that explain, which access rights they might have based on their group memberships, links to other resources, things like that. So now this user is onboarded into the platform. And so we can go ahead and we can take a look at the details for this user. And since I'm an administrator, I can click on my population. And here I see Scott Caranda from Illinois. So I can take a look, and we call this the user canvas view, where we record lots of different information about the user that facilitates collaboration. So we have name information, and you can have multiple names and name objects. That can be really important for different communities. Having official names, primary names, things like that. We collect a number of identifiers that are asserted by the login server, and that's helpful for managing access because we can take these identifiers and we can provision them out to your external resources so that they can consume them and know who's coming to the platform. So we can support that type of provisioning. But we also have identifiers that we generate, that the platform generates for the user when the user enrolls. And you can configure as many as you need for your organization. There's lots of different use cases for custom identifiers, not just having nice identifiers that don't change when people change their names or they might move to different organizations. We still want to track them so we can use a nice identifier that's not name-based. But there's also lots of applications that require custom identifiers. You might have legacy systems that have very specific constraints on the usernames that users need to access them. And one of the nice features about CoManage we see used a lot is the ability to mint those identifiers and curate them in a way that makes sense for the applications. We collect email addresses. You can have multiple email addresses. We collect and manage group information. So when this user was onboarded, we drop them into groups that are appropriate for the optics team, because that was the enrollment flow that we used. We track whether their membership is active or not. We can, I'm not going to demo it now, but we can schedule offboarding, which is a really nice feature. So if you know people should lose access to the platform and lose access to data after a certain amount of time, maybe their grant is expiring or they decided to leave the collaboration, you can set up offboarding flows so that their privileges automatically expire on the dates that you've set. We support roles, and a user can have multiple roles in addition to being parts of multiple groups. So this user was added to the optics team with an affiliation member, and they have active status. And then lastly, on this page, we're showing that this user has an organizational identity. We tracked that they logged in with the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And a user can have multiple organizational identities, multiple sources of authentication, and that can be really handy. So let me show you how that works. Go back to my private browsing window here. Let me log in. Let's see, registry, test, demo. I'm going to log in again as this University of Illinois user. I killed my session, so they're going to make me do Duo again. Fine, you can do it. There we go. And so again, when I'm logged in as the user, going back to this dashboard, I see different types of services that administrators have configured for me that I might have access to, and which icons or widgets you see here depend on the access controls. So I'm only allowed to see the services that I have access to. So as that changes, maybe I'm dropped in different groups or I assume different roles, then the icons here can change. One of the things I can do is I can say, hey, there's a mailing list for weekly colloquia, so I can join that. Maybe I need to join the Beamline schedule list so I know how the schedule is changing for the Beamline. These are self-service groups with mailing lists that back them up. So co-manage can integrate with mailing list servers. So when people join the project, they're automatically added to email lists. And when they leave the project, they automatically are taken off of the lists, all these types of things. The other thing I can do is check out the announcements. So administrators can post announcements that have timestamps. So I'll see the latest announcements and they'll scroll off, so to speak, when they expire. But what I really wanted to show you was that as a user here, I can come in and I have permission. I've configured this platform, this CO, so that all users are allowed to link another account. So maybe I just got done with my postdoc at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and I've decided that I'm going to take a year off before I continue on in my academic life. So I want to link another identity because I'm going to offboard at the University of Illinois. And so what I want to do is link an identity that will survive that process. And CILogon has a couple of identity providers that work well in that context. One of them is GitHub. And I happen to have an account at GitHub, so I'm going to log in there. And they also want me to do two-factor. So co-manage now will record that I did a second authentication, this time with the GitHub login provider, and it will record that information for me so that If I go back over here to the administrative view and I refresh the page, I can see now that this identity or this person has a GitHub identity. And that way, when my University of Illinois credentials expire, but I still want to be part of the collaboration, I can do that. And then maybe when I go to, Melbourne and arrive there as new faculty, I'll get my new credentials there. I can go through another onboarding and still maintain my affiliation with the project. So those are the types of flows that CoManage supports. And once you have a group of people that have onboarded onto your platform, as I mentioned, we support groups and roles, and these will allow you to manage who's a member of the collaboration and who's a member of specific groups. And so then we can take that group information and we can make it available to various applications and downstream resources so that that information can be used for authorization to services. And we support a couple different ways of doing that. For our full service subscribers, we support SAML integration. If you're familiar with SAML, one of the older single sign-on technologies, the one that the EduGain, the Worldwide Federation, is mostly based on SAML these days. So if you have services that like to consume SAML, there's a couple of different ones that are common. Slack can do that. Google Workspaces can do that. AWS, Amazon Web Services Console can do that. We can integrate with SAML service providers, and we can provide this group information to them. But we also allow a newer technology called OpenID Connect, and we allow you to manage yourself if you're the administrator, or you can delegate this to a group of people. You can create what are called OIDC clients on the fly. And there's a lot of tools out there in libraries that support OIDC. And so I don't know what tools you might use, but I know a common one that people are using a lot of these days for doing data analysis are Jupyter notebooks. So Jupyter is an example of a tool that quickly integrates with OpenID Connect. And so if you stood up a Jupyter server and you wanted to allow your users to log in, but you want to control that access, this is how you could do it. You can set all the details that are necessary for your Jupyter server, and then you can add mappings that allow you to get claims like is member of, or in other words, group memberships. And this is all self-service, and so you can mint as many of these as you need, as many applications as you stand up. And this will allow you to control the access to all those applications for the onboarded users. And again, one of the nice things, not only can you control the authorization using groups, but again, because of the way CoManage's expiration policies can be set up, I'm not going to demo that right now, but you can set up expiration policies so that you might have people who come in and they're part of the project. The standard membership is you're part of a project for the time that your grant is in effect. Maybe that's 18 months. And then at the end of 18 months, CoManage can transition you into a grace period. That might last for 2 months. And during those 2 months, you still have access to a smaller number of groups and therefore a smaller set of data. And then after the 2 months are over, CoManage can expire you from the active status to the suspended status. And when that happens, you're pulled out of all groups and you lose all access to the data. If that's the policy of your collaboration, you have the ability to manage those types of details. There's lots of different things we can do, lots of different details. I think one last thing I'll point out before maybe taking some questions is that CoManage has supporting this a very rich data model. So there's a very extensive way of thinking about federated users and about what we attach to those users. We attach identifiers and we attach name objects and we attach email objects, group memberships. This rich data model is what I've been manipulating using the UI, but you don't have to. So if your organization already has their own tooling that your users are used to for a certain look and feel, and you just want to add the identity and access management components of that, then you can leverage the REST API. And so that allows you access to the data model. You can do things like leverage enrollment flows, but your users don't have to live inside of CoManage. We have some users that, or some organizations that do that, other organizations that don't. It really depends on sort of what experience and look and feel they want. Some of our communities are really quite small, and they like the ability to sort of have a self-service portal. That's what they need for their community, and they can get it through CoManage. Other communities, already have an extensive user portal, and they just need to sort of bolt onto it the identity and access management capabilities. And so they leverage the REST API instead. So that is the very quick tour of CoManage and CILogon and what we can do. And I've been talking for a long time, so I am going to stop now.
Hey, thanks, Scott. This is Peter. I've got a couple of quick questions. That was a really good demo. Thank you for that.
Sure.
I saw how you're able to invite yourself. Is it possible to invite an entire a small organization or a departmental OU and say, I trust this entire department for collaborating on my platform? Everyone there, as long as they can authenticate, are welcome.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we have two ways of doing that. I don't think I can demo them, but I can certainly talk to them. So one way is we do have a bulk way of enrollments, and so you can feed in essentially a text file with the details, and the bulk enrollment tool will consume that and it will fire them all off. So if you come to us with, here's my set of 200 users and their email addresses, we can bulk enroll. The other way of doing that is we have a concept called an organizational identity source. I don't think I have yet. Oh, I do have ORCID enabled. So if you have an external source that you already trust, you might already have some type of registry tool that's pre-existing. We support out of the box, we support LDAP servers, SQL database, ORCID, as you can see. If you have a way of already presenting that information to us, then we can consume that with this tool called an organizational identity source. And we'll pull in that information. It can be pulled in as a one-time event, or it can be an ongoing event where we synchronize to your upstream system of record. And then people get onto the platform. And once they're onto the platform, we essentially make a copy of that information so that, again, you can manage it. So we take what the upstream system of record gives us, but then we create these person records and that's what you put into groups. That's what you put into to things like that. Okay. Did that answer your question?
It does. Thank you. Thank you. The other question I had was you showed us the user attributes, and that was great to see everything in one place. Is it possible to extend those attributes? An example, other identifiers, perhaps their publications or other information about that user? Is that extensible? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And again, there's a couple different ways. So one thing is we do have extended types. And so I can create different types of extended types. And so I'll just make one up on the fly. Let me make up something silly. So if you need to track shoe size, then we can do it. And then shoe size would become an attribute that's available so that you can collect that information and there it is, shoe size, and make it available. We can do identifiers like that on both people and on groups. So if they need different types of identifiers. So that's one way that co-manage is extensible.
Okay.
We have something that's a little bit simpler and faster. We have the notion of, let me click around here and get back to the role. So each role can have ad hoc attributes. And we see some organizations use this for things that are maybe just a little bit looser. Maybe you're not consuming those downstream quite as much, but it can add whatever you'd like. Yeah, I think I've used home institution in my demos before. So maybe you need to collect home institution, but you don't have a way to collect it programmatically. And so you can just do something like this, and they can say they're from NYU. So ad hoc attributes are another option. And then the last thing I'll say about that is co-manage is very extensible in that it supports a large number actually of plugin points. So co-manage is written in PHP.
Mhm.
It's written using a very popular framework called Cake PHP. And if you are a full service subscriber, then you're allowed to use these plugin points, and you can write plugins that extend the data model. You can write plugins that add new enrollment flow features. I did one last week for a subscriber where we collect a bunch of different information about which computing clusters that they should have accounts on. So we have a drop down for that. And then the person doing the invitation ticks which boxes they want and which computing clusters the user should get an account on. So we do have a lot of extensible capabilities,
Okay.
and those are leveraged by writing little bits of PHP.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm very conscious of hogging all the question time. Last one, I promise, is you showed us the accessible services. So once you land onto the home page, based on your authorization, this is what you see. From a end service perspective, Scott, what work needs to be done on the service side to say, well, here's a token coming from CILogon, and this person or this group has access to my service?
Right. So I think today for many services, especially if you are going to be writing them yourself, or it's something your collaboration is growing and developing, your community is developing, my recommendation today would be to use OpenID Connect. It's the newer of the single sign-on protocols. It's much easier to use and to write clients that consume this information from CILogon. In fact, if you go through some of the tutorials that Google has, for example, you can write an OIDC, we call them OIDC clients. You can write one of these applications in mere minutes using Python or PHP, whatever libraries you like. And because it's all standards based, CILogon works with those clients just as well. And if you have people that write OIDC clients, then and spend a little bit of time learning OpenID Connect or OIDC, then these types of details about how you integrate a client will be immediately recognizable to them. And it really comes down to your service will have a callback where the web browser is sent to after authentication, and it's going to receive a signed blob of JSON that CILogon sends to it. And what your tool needs to do is check that signature, make sure it's valid. And then it's going to look inside that JSON blob, and it's going to find what we call claims about users, their name, their email address, their group memberships, whatever, their shoe size, if that's what you want to assert. And if you were to look up, clients, there's a lot of libraries. You can build them in, like I said, Python, Ruby, Node.js, JavaScript. It's really the modern way to do it.
Yeah.
And the last thing I'll say is that one of our favorite tools, if you have web developers who are familiar with Apache, Apache has a great module. It's not from Apache, it's from our friend Hans, but it's widely adopted and supported. There's an Apache module that just does OpenIDC, and that's really easy to get going with. If you have an Apache server, you can get going in 5 minutes.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Scott. Yeah.
Sure.
Peter, that's you, I think.
Hi. Yep. Hi. Sorry about him. I just I think that my question might have just been answered by that last answer, but I just wanted to sort of check a kind of an authorization workflow that we have in our mind. Working on the big language data commons project, we're going to need to have a very distributed way of storing resources. So the things will go into a repository, and we need to have a long-term view of preservation. So the pattern that we're looking at is you store an object, digital object data set with a license, and obviously it needs to be a human readable license, but we want to have a machine readable component, preferably maybe just a URL or a collection of URLs. So that when somebody comes to the repository doesn't have to do a repository service for the long term. Don't really do all this authorization stuff and keep track of groups and so on. We want to hand that off to another thing. So this looks really good for that. So I just want to sort of check the workflow. If somebody shows up at the repository and requests an item, and then we have an authorizing URL, we could put a very thin service in front of CILogon. I assume that just ask the user to log in, get back group membership, and then we can check whether they're a member of a license group. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
And we would do that, in the repository app, or a license server app would be just a kind of a shim that would handle the login and check the membership against some patterns in a URL that we, if it's our machine readable license scheme.
Yes.
And then it can give a yes or no to the repository.
Sure.
Right. Okay. So that and so that's just the what's the thing? OpenID Auth.
OpenID Connect. That's
OpenID
right.
Connect, yeah. So the OpenID Connect will give you group membership and whatever, and we can structure that however we liked inside the CILogon.
That's correct. And what I've been mostly showing and talking about is the flow where the user, goes through the flow, and then at the time they get to the service, we're delivering with their authentication. At the same time, we're delivering not only who they are, but what authorizations they have. And that's one architectural model. But CILogon also supports a number, because of the standards and our support for the standard, supports a number of different architectures, so that it's possible to have brokers, for example. You might have central community broker that you pass the information about, well, this is my user, and I need this user then to be looked up and determine what access the user has, and that broker can contact CILogon using a type of token and receive information about that user that includes their entitlement to have access to a particular set of data. So there are lots of complicated architectures and there's less complicated architectures, and we can support a spectrum of those. It really depends on sort of the details of what you're designing.
Okay, so I think that it would be worth looking at this for the project I'm working on, which is probably a conversation with AAF and ARDC about how we might support that and resource that. But thanks, it was a really good demo.
Sure. Yeah, my colleagues there, John and Patrick, are experts at this stuff, and they also have other AAF colleagues who know OIDC and SAML inside and out. So they'll be able to help you with those details.
Yeah, so I think what I'm thinking is, and this may be of use to some of the other projects, it might make sense to try this with our steering committee groups, because we're building some data sets and repositories and so on, and the first thing we want to do is be able to show them to those steering committees, and they will be from a wide range of institutions, some universities, but also some other kinds of organisations. So that would be a good way of testing how this works, and if we can get some of these senior people using it and understanding it, we can work out how it might work more broadly across their communities. So I'll have that conversation in Australia. But thanks.
Sure.
Lauren, you had your hand up. Has your question already been answered?
More or less. I was basically going to ask if it had built-in capabilities to query users specifically. For instance, if you had a service that would require up to the second authorization, and you didn't want a stale stale token that contained claims in it to persist for weeks at a time, etc. If you could have the authentication token come in, have like an OPA or some other policy authorization tool, make a call back and query the CILogon, or in this case, co-manage, to get that information in real time, rather than have it come with the token. And that was literally answered as I put my hand up. So that sounds like that's capable.
Yeah, it's capable with OIDC, and we have other mechanisms to try to support lots of different integration patterns. So again, there's the API user, and then we do, and I think I set it up here, for every deployment, we also operate for you, although you can add more if you'd like, but we operate for you a LDAP server. And then we provision the information to LDAP. The nice thing about LDAP is that it has been around forever, and a lot of tools, especially maybe some older tools, know how to integrate with it. So we try to make the information available where your applications need to consume it.
So Peter put a question in the chat about whether deprovisioning is a challenge with open or federated IDPs like Google and GitHub. Yes, it is, because those accounts essentially never expire. So you would need to build some sort of
expiry,
or expiry process in. It might be a process of revalidating the user every 6 months, 12 months, whatever an appropriate time period is. So that's why we typically prefer the Research and Education Federation identity sources through EduGain or AAF or in common. Because as part of signing up to that process, the institutions guarantee or commit to offboarding people promptly. So they leave the institution, they're gone from your collaboration.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I'd really like to see a diagram of that, which is how you distribute, I guess, the risk across, and how the technical processes and policies support that. That would really help to, because John, I took your point about making sure that the authorization sits as closely to the group that undertakes that, to be able to see how this kind of plugged in external validation services can interact with that, so you can kind of understand the time box that you've got risks and your internal processes.
Yeah. So I had a chat to Scott some weeks ago about this, and he suggested that a number of organisations are entering into a memorandum of understanding type arrangement where some of this is laid out and explained, and expectations are set ahead of time. I mean, you could go to a formal contracted arrangement, but typically these collaborations are not actually legal entities. They're loosely affiliated collaborations, and there is no legal entity that can kind of enter that agreement. So an MOU is sort of about the best you can hope to achieve.
Or you can actually set your own policies, which is, I guess, because the group really is the point at which you actually determine the risk most proximately, and you can, I guess, have a process around that which you run a regular review depending on how concerned you are about people's access to those resources. So it could be quarterly, it could be half yearly. I guess if it's really scary stuff, weekly.
Yeah, so in the case of AAF, I mean, we have a set of rules that people have to sign up to be part of the club as either an identity provider or a service provider. And we run an annual compliance process. So each year, all of those participants have to say, yes, I have understood the rules and I am still compliant with the rules. And if they're not, they need to explain what steps are in progress to make them compliant, an expected end date, or to have a discussion with us about how to get compliant again.
That was a great presentation, Scott and Jim. That was really valuable. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
So we are at time, 1 minute over time. Is there any final remaining questions?
How soon until platforms in Australia can talk to the AAF to get this?
That's a good question. So we are operating CILogon for the Australian Biocommons already. It's in a kind of a pilot pre-release mode at the moment, but everything's working. We're connecting production services to that. We have a pitch in with DESI to try and get some ongoing funding for this. So the challenge is this is a fairly complex piece of infrastructure. It makes no sense for individual projects or individual NCRIS capabilities to do this themselves. We need to take a national approach to this, or it's just not going to work particularly well. So, I mean, Heath went and talked to the expert working group for the current roadmap process. So we've provided a bit of input. We've laid out our plan there, and fingers crossed some money comes through. It doesn't make a lot of sense for people to be trying to do this individually. It's too complex and messy.
John, just following that up, I know we've had a bit of a conversation about this before, but for given projects here, I say, what's the form of support we can put into that process now, given what's happening here in Australia, to sort of facilitate that, to demonstrate that support and that we don't want to do it?
I'm just going to put the URL into the chat. Oh, autocorrect. NCRIS turns into McRibs if anyone's interested.
Like that, that's bizarro enough.
So I've just put a URL in there that people can kind of read the pitch. I guess just feed it back into that NCRIS road mapping process at any and all available opportunities would be my best advice. The more they hear it from the more different sources, the more likely it is to actually stick.
John, that URL isn't working. So is this the
NCRIS.aaf.edu.au?
Oh, that one. Okay. That one came through to me. I'll put that in there.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right.
So we've got a fairly polished document there that outlines why this needs to be a national capability and not just a piecemeal approach.
I guess it would be useful to be able to, as Steve is saying, put force behind that to say that these projects require this national gap to be filled, because it's not being filled by anyone presently.
Siobhan, do you have any other suggestions about how to make that a thing from an ARDC point of view?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's really strong use cases. And the more we have these conversations, the more it becomes apparent that there's absolutely a need for a coordinated effort to make this happen. I think talking to more increased facilities and building those cases is probably the first step, and showing that there is a solution. I mean, this is just so great to see that there's something that could really solve a problem that people have been talking about for a long time. And particularly with the projects that we're running at the moment, these co-investment projects, we've got really clear cases. So let's keep on putting those cases together. And I think I'm certainly happy to help maybe coordinate those a little bit more, so we can have a collection of cases to take in and say this is something that we really need.
So who is it that you feed this information up to? Because collating the information for me is administration, but we need a decision maker.
Yeah, gotcha. For me, I can pass it on to my higher people, but it's not something that it's for the ARDC to do. It's really something we need to take up to the department. We need funding to be put in this direction.
Yeah, but from a project perspective, you've got multiple projects here that are funded by the ARDC. What do you need? A statement for these projects that say we need this infrastructure.
Yeah,
I can pass that through to Rosie really easily and see if Rosie can take that up. Yeah, I think that would be the appropriate thing to do. Does that sound okay, Ingrid?
Yeah.
Yep, let's do it.
I was going to say,
I'm an advocate.
Yeah, I was going to suggest, say, bringing up through the community practice and the joint for the platforms projects, these sorts of things. But yeah, a statement that goes, say, just straight through to Rosie, basically. As I say, we've got 3-4 platforms projects just on this call. And I don't think there'd be any debate from any of us.
And they're certainly not even initiating projects. We've got projects that are up and running as well. So it's clear throughout all of that process that it's essential. Let's take this offline and see if we can get something moving fairly quickly as well.
Yeah.
But I think it'd be also good to have some trials to actually get onto it. In addition to
yes, please,
the longer term stuff, but I would like to bring our projects on as a test case and
so the big challenge there at the moment is resourcing on our end to help you guys out with that. So we've got Patrick that Biocommons are paying for, but we don't really have any other capacity at the moment, so it's we're a bit resource constrained there. I mean, the other thing that Scott mentioned briefly but kind of glossed over is that integration with command line facilities is also possible through here. So it's not quite as streamlined as a web app, but it's a hell of a lot better than we've ever had before. And we didn't really even discuss that or look at that in any great detail today. But that's been sort of the white whale of federated identity for a long time.
Not any albatross.
No.
I don't want to tease you too much, Jen, but I think we're going to have a demo of some new functionality around command line, probably in the mid to late fall, and I think you're going to be really impressed. So
cool.
I'll let you know when that happens. There's some good stuff coming out of some of our collaborations with the Fermi National Accelerator Lab, Fermi Lab here in the US.
Yeah, cool. All right, so we are well and truly over time now. Thanks everyone for your involvement and participation. Thank you very much, Scott and Jim, for your time. I know it's getting kind of late in the evening over there. But really appreciate that, and it's been a great, very useful presentation for everyone, I think.
No problem. Everyone have a good day. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Very much.